Hey everybody, I'm Becki Adams. Thank you for stopping by the Scrapbook and Cards Today YouTube channel. This is a layout that I created for the fall 2023 issue of Scrapbook and Cards Today magazine. So on this layout, we are going to add lots and lots of layers, and we're going to talk about layering different pattern papers and embellishments. The collection that I'm working with today is from Maggie Holmes and American Crafts. It's called Woodland Grove. And I've worked with this collection a few times before. And so I kind of have just a lot of scraps in my, the little folder where I keep my collections. So I have just a pile of these scraps, and we're going to start putting them together and see what we can come up with. So the first layer that I have is this, it's kind of a periwinkle checkered pattern, and I trimmed that down to just fit just larger than my 4x6 photo, and then I stitched around the edge of that with my sewing machine and some white thread. And I'm just going to start building layers behind that. So on this project, I'm kind of working a little bit backwards, and instead of starting with my background and working up, I'm starting with my photo and working backwards. So the next layer I've added is that black polka dot paper. And I have chosen my background, and it's that wood grain paper with a white cardstock piece on top of that. And then from that, we're going to build pattern paper layers. So to make sure that I have room for, my title, my journaling, and my photo, I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth here for just a second between my background and building those layers behind the photo. So again, on some of these pieces of pattern paper, I used my sewing machine and some white thread to just stitch along the edges. I went back and forth between a zigzag stitch and just a plain white stitch. That's kind of hard to see here on screen, but you'll be able to see it a little bit better in the close-ups here at the end of the video. So I'm just trimming down those threads and making sure that they are tucked away. You can definitely leave them out if you would like. It's my preference to kind of tuck them in for a little bit cleaner look. Okay, so now back to my photo and building those layers behind that photo. I have this beautiful, I believe it's a hydrangea pattern paper that I wanted to go kind of on that very back layer. So I'm laying that on the back where I want it. I haven't adhered it quite yet. And then I'm going to work on building some of those layers behind my photo. So I noticed that this hydrangea paper is not as big as I need it to be. It was cut down into two smaller pieces from a previous project. So all I did was put those two pieces together. Now there is still a tiny seam there, and I guess if you look for it, you could probably see it, but in all honesty, nobody would ever notice that little tiny seam. Most of it is covered up by other layers. So I'm just taking a few more bits of pattern paper. Again, this pink pattern wasn't quite as big as I wanted it to be, and so you'll see me adhere that so it looks like one continuous piece behind the photo. But before I jump into more pattern paper layers, I have this, I believe it came in, it's a stationery pack. It's an embellishment pack from the Woodland Grove collection. And I just found a couple of pieces in there that I liked the edges of. I'm not going to show the full die cut, so to speak, or the full piece of stationery. So I'm taking the ones that I like the edge and adding them to my project. So I have that lavender with kind of a scalloped edge to it, and I put that in the upper right corner of my layout. And then here I'm making this look like there is one longer continuous piece of that pink pattern paper, even though it's just 2 smaller bits. And I'm laying this out on the background to make sure that I like where everything is placed. I wanted to make sure that that piece of paper was straight after I kind of pieced it together. So I just used my T-square ruler to make sure that that's nice and straight. And then again, I'll use my T-square ruler to make sure that my photo is straight on the page. So I'll use, just adhere this whole big piece of tons of layers of pattern paper and my photo right to the background. And from then we will get into some embellishing and adding the other 2 really important components to my page, which are my title and my journaling. So it wasn't exactly going down on the back of the background of the layout like I wanted it to. So I kind of deconstruct things and make sure that things are straight as I lay them down. You probably should do this in the beginning. I'm not sure why I did it this way, but either way works, as long as you have some forgiving adhesive. My adhesive is, I'm using a tape runner from scrapbook.com, and it is permanent, but if you peel things up within a short amount of time, a few minutes, then you're okay and you can kind of maneuver things. But it does become very permanent after it sits. So if you want to move things around, do it early on. Don't wait. And so now I have the placement of my photo almost done. It does take me a little bit to get that. I don't think I'm the only one that struggles getting everything placed just how I like it. Sometimes when you're working with layers, you have to be willing to take a little bit of time to adjust things and reposition things so that they look just how you would you want them to, because it's a little bit harder to place things when you're working with small bits of pattern paper. So there I have that really pretty rose stationery piece that honestly I should have trimmed that down and just used that kind of notebook edge, but I didn't think of that until after the fact. So with that notebook edge, that's kind of the last of my pattern paper layers, so to speak. So it's time to start pulling in my title and my journaling to make sure that I have the correct placement for those 2 things before I bring in the embellishments. So I took just a minute and placed my title. It took me a few minutes to get the letter stickers placed, so you'll just see them after I have them down. So I'm using a combination of tape runner adhesive and liquid adhesive. This is the Artiste glue from scrapbook.com. And I'm doing that, one, for a stronger hold. The magazine projects travel are shipped quite a bit, so I wanted to make sure that everything was adhered really quickly or really well. And that liquid adhesive gives you just a tiny bit of wiggle room so that you can make sure that everything is placed correctly before you put it down. So I went through the embellishment packs from the Woodland Grove collection and picked out several bits and pieces that I wanted to work with that coordinated with this project. So I have those little bits there in my that little tray, and I am pulling those in. I want to create an embellishment cluster in the top left corner of the photo and in the bottom right corner of the photo. And then I have that strip of tickets that I really like, and it's a I believe it came, I don't remember if it was the papery pack or the stationery pack, but it has, it's washi. So it's a really thin, almost kind of translucent sticker that I'll be placing there. So I cut down that scallop frame in half so that I can use part of it on the top and bottom of my photo in my embellishment clusters. And then these other little die cuts, flowers, ticket stubs, I'm placing those as well too with a little bit of foam adhesive. So all of my paper layers I put down with just a tape runner. I didn't use foam adhesive. You definitely could. It just really depends on your preference. I do prefer to have like my pattern paper layers, I adhere with a tape runner because I prefer my embellishments to be popped up with foam adhesive. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking that gorgeous pink flower and I put just a pop dot, an adhesive square from Scrapbook Adhesives by 3L on the back. I also gently bent the edge of the flower up to create even more dimension. So I do the same with these leaves and just use some foam adhesive and bend the edges up slightly. On this flower that is in the upper left corner, I wanted it tucked into some of my paper layers, actually on top of the paper layers there by my photo. And so I just put foam adhesive on the outside edge. So to make sure that both of these clusters, embellishment clusters, are balanced, I made sure that I had like the black leaf sprig went into each embellishment cluster. There were green leaves in each embellishment cluster, as well as a pink flower in each embellishment cluster. So I wanted to balance those out. I think that the greenery die cuts are gorgeous in this collection, and I wanted to use them as much as possible. So I'm just tucking in that last kind of black leaf die cut there at the bottom, again using some foam adhesive to adhere that to the background, but also bending the edges slightly. There are a few more bits and pieces. I love this little die cut that has the greenery as well as the rosebuds. I don't have a lot of space there under that flower, so you don't see all of that, but that's okay. Just tuck that right in, and it fills that space beautifully and adds a little bit more interest to just that one flower embellishment cluster. So I have this circle die cut and the number 5, and I wanted to add that, like that was one of my must add to this layout, one of the elements to this layout. I have the 5 because there are 5 people in our family, so I thought that the number 5 emphasized the story that I'm telling on this project, and it fits so perfectly in that circle that I couldn't resist. So I added that number 5, and then I also adhered that washi ticket strip down there at the bottom. So I'm down to just the last few little bits on this layout, and I go back and forth and have a hard time kind of deciding what I want to put where. And even after I shut my camera off and I thought the project was finished, I added I think there's one little extra thing that you might notice in the close-up video, the close-up shots at the end of the video. Let me know in the comments below if you can figure out what that little bit is that I added. So now it's time to add my journaling. I've kind of been saving a spot for that right at the top of the page above my title. With my journaling, I print my journaling at home just on a regular printer. I use the American typewriter font, and then I print it out on just regular white printer paper, and I trim it down with my paper trimmer, and then I add 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape on the back of each of the strips, and at that point you see them come up in the video. So then when I have the exact placement that I want for my journaling, then I just remove the backing and place the journaling strips. So there at the bottom, that little tiny journaling strip is the date. And here I'm just showing you all the layers and the little bits of this beautiful layout. And then we'll move into the shots of the finished project. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the Scrapbook and Cards Today YouTube channel. And I will see you again soon.